Okay, so thank you for joining me today in determining stain index with FCS Express. My name is Juan Vasquez. I'm a technical application specialist with the Novo software. And today we're going to be talking about stain index and how it relates to FCS Express. So what we plan on doing in the next upcoming update of FCS Express 5 is we plan on introducing a function where we can have FCS Express calculate stain index for you. Okay. So for those of you that aren't familiar with stain index, what stain index is, it's an idea that was first introduced by Dave Parks at the 2004 ISAC meeting in France. And the idea is that the stain index is a normalized signal to noise ratio, where you look at the distance between your signal, your positive signal and your negative signal, but you also take into account the spread or the variance coming from your negative signal and how that may impact the resolution of your positive signal, okay? After 2004, there were several publications that proposed variations on the theme of the idea, and you can see that those Marty Bigos, Hollenmacher, and Bill Tedford had published those, and you can find those readily on the website. But the idea is that with the stain index, you're going to use the stain index information to help design your experiments and panels more optimally. So anyone that's done flow for the past 20 years knows that 20 years ago you're probably using 2 to 4 colors at most, or the majority of us at least. And if you're using those 2 to 4 colors, chances are they're probably FITCP, PERCP, PERCP Sci 5.5, or PE Sci 5.5, or Sci 5.5, and APC. And if you're using those fluorochromes, chances are you probably knew without really had to do too much legwork about which one of those parameters was the brightest. And it was typically PE or one of the PE conjugates followed by APC, and then PERCP or whatever your FL3 parameter was. And then running in last place was typically FITC. But as technology has changed and these instruments have become expanded with more laser options, more light sources, more fluorochrome options, we're no longer relegated to organic dyes, halogen-based dyes. We have polymers now on the market, and ideally we'd like to create our experiments and design our panels where we can maximize which colors are being conjugated to which antibodies so that we can maximize the resolution of those signals. Okay, and the idea is that when you perform a stain index for a parameter, you'd like to pair the highest density antigens with the stain indices that have the lowest numbers. Okay, so highest density antigens like CD8, CD3, CD15, CD45, those would typically be saved for parameters where you might have maybe a mid to lower type stain index, where your lower density antigens like CD25, CD19, any type of cytokine, chemokine, or phosphorylated protein antibody that you have bound to a fluorochrome, you'd like to save those for the brightest fluorochrome possible. Okay, so that way you can maximize that resolution. And a lot of this is going to depend on the application. If you're dealing with just typical PBMCs, whole blood stained, this can be a pretty standard routine procedure. However, if you're dealing with, let's say you're dealing with stimulated T cells where you may have decreased amounts of CD8 or internalized CD8, then that CD8 is probably not going to be as high density as it would be on regular cells or untreated cells. So you kind of have to keep that in mind and kind of plan this around your application, design that with the application in mind. So what I've done here is I've created a type of analysis that kind of shows you, I guess, a pretty comprehensive way of how you would calculate the stain index for a given instrument. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're looking at an instrument that has 4 lasers, and what I've done is I've actually broken my layout into different pages where I've kind of centralized the analysis on each page for each laser and looking at the parameters that are specific for those lasers. Okay, so on my blue page, I'm looking at histograms that are looking at a fluorochrome that was stained in each parameter. FITC, PERCP, Sci 5.5 that were all stained in the blue laser. Yellow-green is obviously going to be all those, the PE dyes and the PE tandem dyes. My red laser parameters, the Alexa dyes, the APC and APC tandems. And then finally the violet, where I'm looking at any halogen-based or brilliant violet polymer-based type fluorochromes. Okay. And what I've done on each page is I've kind of summarized basically the data that we're looking at here. If I just go back to my introduction, again, just to summarize, the stain index is basically looking at the distance between my positive peak and the negative peak, but also taking into account the width of that negative peak. And it's summarized here by this equation you see here, where we're looking at the distance divided by the width. In other words, if we look at it in stain index terms, we're looking at the median or mean, depending on what stat you want to use to measure those peaks. The mean of the median of the positive minus the median of the negative divided by the quantity of your standard deviation of the negative multiplied by 2. Okay? And what I've done here is I've created a table to kind of summarize all the stats we're going to need for each one of them. So on my blue laser page, I have a table that I've created where I have each of the parameters that are being detected by that laser. And I've summed it up where I'm looking at the median of the negative, the standard deviation of the negative, the positive of the median, and then I have my stain index being calculated off of that. So the way we're doing that is we're creating custom tokens to help us calculate that information. So if I open my custom tokens window, you'll see here what I've done is I've actually broken this down and separated it into all the different lasers that I'm doing as part of this experiment. Okay? So I have all my my blue laser information, my yellow green, my red, and my violet laser. So a lot of this I've done for you. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch to my violet laser page. And you'll see here that I actually have a blank space here left for my pack blue parameter. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a custom token to help calculate the stain index. So as I mentioned, in our next update of FCS Express 5, we're actually going to have a specific function where we're going to have the software calculate the stain index for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the folder where I have my custom tokens for my violet laser. I'm going to click on the plus sign to create a new custom token. I'm going to give it a name. And then down below is where I'm going to put the formula for this. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a function. So I'll just put equal sign. I'm going to right click within this field. And you'll see that we can either insert a token or insert a function. So from the function list, we have many different categories from which we can choose. The one that I'm looking for is going to be part of our statistics category. And you'll see that we now have the option, or we will have the option, to insert the stain index. So with the function, it's going to be, you're going to have your command, and then you're going to have placeholders for all the variables that are going to make up that function. All right. So we're going to have a placeholder for the positive mean or median, the negative mean or median, and then the standard deviation of the negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of all this. And the way we're going to do this is we can either right click and insert a token, and we're going to choose a statistic token. So really this is kind of an extension of our text and tokens and stats webinar for those of you that haven't seen it yet. If you haven't seen it yet, I do recommend that you see that because there is a lot of good information about how to use tokens and how to create custom tokens that can be easily fit into your analysis. So by selecting statistic, I'm going to click on insert. And the idea is that I want to take a stat from any plot that resides in my layout. So whether I have 8 pages or 80 pages, I can tell the software to extract a stat from any plot that's on here. I could just easily navigate down. I can find the plot and then tell the software to take a stat from any of the markers that are within that plot. So I'm going to take the M2 marker. That's my positive. And in this case, I'm going to choose the median. Once I click OK, you'll see that FCS Express will put the token in there that we've chosen. Okay? If I open this up, you can actually see what the whole description of that token is. So if we just look at the text of that and the description of that token, it's telling us that it's taking a statistic for the median from that histogram that's looking at our pack blue sample, and it's coming from our M2 marker. What I can also do is I can right click on this and tell the software to show display text. I can show the value rather than the overall description. And that way I can actually see the number. So then you'll see that this number matches this number that we see here behind the window. So at this point, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put another comma. And again, I can just insert, or if I have already our marker already on my plot, I can just actually just drag this into the field. And then when I let go, the information is already selected for you. The software already knows what plot that's coming from. It already knows which marker I'm using because that's the one I'm dragging. All I need to do is just select the stat. And then I'll just click OK. And again, you'll see the new stat there. If I want, I can tell the software to display the value for that text instead. And then you'll see that that number matches up with this number. So then finally, I'm just going to put in what the standard deviation for this stat. Now I can, again, drag that over here, or I could just simply just highlight this, Control-C to copy, and then paste it. And then I can just double-click this, and then just change the stat to the standard deviation. And then once that's done, if I want to insert this within this plot, I could just simply just take it, drag and drop it to this cell. Okay? What I've also done is I've actually created a generic stain index that I can just drag and drop onto each of these plots. You can see that I already have the stain index on these plots. And the way I've done that is when I create these tokens, I can actually specify which specific plot this information is coming from, but I can also tell the software just to use the plot that the text box is on. So when we drop this token information onto our layout or inside a plot, it's basically just creating another text box that has that token inside. So the software is smart enough to know that this text box is on this plot, my packed blue plot, and it can calculate the parameters for the stain index based off of the information that I've specified within that token. So it already knows that I'm looking at a median from my M1. It already knows that I'm looking for the median for my M2 and also the standard deviation for my negative. So I can actually just go from plot to plot and easily just drag that on here. And I can get further verification that all these numbers are accurate. Whereas down below, I did it specifically, created a formula calculating each specific plot. Okay. Now, for those of you that aren't on version 5 or won't have the capability to access the stain index function, what you can easily do is you can just create a formula within FCS Express using a custom token. So the way we would do that is we can actually just add a new custom token. I'm just going to give it a name. And then down below, we're going to define that formula. So again, it's going to be the positive minus the negative. And what I'll do is actually you can just copy and paste this. And I can just change my marker from M2 to M1. I'm just going to put some parentheses in there. And we're going to divide that by I'm going to change the stat to the standard deviation. And we're going to multiply that by 2. And just make sure that we close it off with our parentheses. So now if I just drag this onto my layout, I should get the same number as was performed with the full function. Okay. And what I've done here is I've just summarized this information here within my table in the statistics tab. So again, I could just drag and drop that from the custom tokens window, or if I just right-click within that cell, I can insert the token, and I can access my custom tokens directly from my insert token window. Whereas I can actually just click on my violet laser, select the token, and click insert, and there it is. Okay. Now, as part of this analysis, what we can do is we can incorporate batch processing, where maybe we want to export all this information to Excel, so that way we have an Excel sheet with all this information. We can sort in Excel how, what the highest stain index is and what the lowest is. So what I've done here is I've gone through the process of creating a batch action where I'm exporting my data to Excel. I'm going to have it lined up by column. And then to export this, I'm just going to click on my Run button. And in the meantime, you can see here it's opened up on my other monitor. Let's just open that up a little bit. And I can tell the software to sort. Let's select that column. We'll do it from largest to smallest. And we will expand the selection to include both columns. So that way we can see from this particular experiment, you can see that the parameter that gives me the highest stain index is by far the PE parameter, which is not surprising for anyone that's used PE off of a yellow-green laser. Okay, and then the lowest parameter is coming from the red laser, specifically Alexa 700, checking in at 31.21. So obviously you'd want to save that for something that's fairly bright staining, depending on your application. Okay. So another example of this I want to show you is just, here's another type of cytometer. This one's a 3-laser cytometer, where we used a little bit of a different antibody, but the idea is still going to give you roughly the same idea, same information. So with this 3-laser cytometer, again, I broke down each page into blue, red, and violet. And for my custom tokens window, I've done the same thing where I'm using my tokens to give me the information I want, whether I'm doing a generic function where I'm just telling the software just to calculate the stats based off of the plot where that text box is contained, or I've made a specific function. Again, through a right click from the Insert Function tab, underneath the Statistics category, you'll be able to find this, okay? And then we're just filling in the variables as we need to for each particular plot, for each parameter, where we're taking the positive median, the negative median, and then the negative standard deviation, okay? I've also integrated the ability to export this information to Excel as well. And by clicking on the Run button, I can export this information. And then we can sort this out as we need to, so that way we can see for this particular instrument what my brightest fluorochromes are and how I would design my panel, my experiment using this information. So for this particular instrument, you could see that BV421 by far has the brightest stain index. So I'd want to save that for anything that would be a dim staining or a low density antigen. So I've showed you how to use this stain index in regards to the instrument setup, basically how you would design your panels. What you can also do is you can use this as a way to look at titration data. So what I've done here is I have an experiment here where I'm looking at intracellular CD3. And I have this set up where I have various plots set up at different concentrations of that antibody. On page 2, what I've done is I've actually used one of the features in FCS Express 5, a scatter with regression plot, to help plot out this data and to provide an indication of which concentration is giving me the highest stain index. Okay? So the way this is actually being used is once I insert this, I can create a custom data grid where I'm filling in the variables. I can fill in information such as keywords that are being derived from each file. So I have one column where I'm extracting concentration information from my data, from each of the data files. I have 6 data files here in total. And for each data file, each one is being displayed in a separate plot. And I'm just telling the software to look at that information from each individual plot. and then the stain index is being calculated for that in another custom token. Where if I just open up my view custom tokens window, again, I can create a generic where I could just drop it on the plot and then software automatically creates it based off of the populations within that plot. Or I can make it specific, whether I'm using the function that we described earlier, or if I just want to have the software automatically do the math instead, if I don't have the most current version of FCS Express 5 available. With this scatter with regression plot, we do have several custom tokens and tokens that are available to us now that help us perform our analysis. Specifically, we have the ability to look at what model names being applied to a plot, and also what the model parameters are as it applies to that regression that's being performed within that plot. And what we can also do is we can have the software just provide an overall summary for all the different model parameters as well in one big long text line. So that way, if we wanted to look and see what the regression, the raw square was, we can see what that value is and how it pertains up here. So if I wanted to format this plot and apply a different regression and see how that overall fit is for my titration data, I can just right-click on this plot, go to Format, and then you'll see with this plot, I have a regression fit parameter where I can just change my information based off of whatever type of regression I want to use. I can preview that. You'll see the models will update, as will the curve and whatever the model parameters are for that data. And then I can undo that if I need to. But also, if you have other titration data and you just want to kind of zip through it easily, what we can do is we could just make a basic one-page 3-plot layout where we just have the data file. This is for cellular CD3, whereas before we're looking at intracellular CD3. And what we can do is we can just go from sample to sample, have the software automatically calculate these stats for us. Again, we can extract information as it pertains to the concentration of the antibody, what the positive median is, what the negative median is, what the distance between the two is, and what the standard deviation is of the negative. Okay, so whether you want to use standard deviation or robust standard deviation, both of those stats are available to you in FCS Express. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm having the software take this information from a dot plot where we're actually using a percentile quadrant. Okay, and then we can have that. We can manually set that percentile quadrant as we go from sample to sample. The software is going to automatically decide where that separation is based off of the percentile that we've told the software to use. And then the stats will automatically calculate for us from sample to sample. Okay? And also what I've done is I've actually added an overlay here where I'm putting the original sample, the original concentration, and just comparing each additional concentration of sample to what that the first sample that we used, so that we have an idea of the stain index between the original versus whatever the last concentration that we're using is. Okay? So like we've done before, what we can do is we can export all this information to Excel. Just through batch processing, we can just click on Run, and the software will go through each of those samples. And because it's all automatic, we're using these percentile quadrants, and the stats are automatically updating from sample to sample. We can get a basic overall summary of all the stats that we've added as part of that Excel export. So again, if we want to, we can just sort. And then we can find out which one has the highest stain index and which one we want to use specifically for our experiment. Okay, so today's webinar wasn't going to be a terribly long webinar. It was the idea that we would introduce you, if you haven't known already, the idea of the stain index, and that we will be adding this function to FCS Express 5 in the next upcoming update. And in conclusion, I just want to say that the stain index, as most of you already know, offers a normalized metric to help you get a better idea of how your parameters on a given instrument perform and which parameters would be the best matches for the parameters in an experiment that you're trying to optimize. In FCS Express 5, we offer the ability to incorporate the stain index into your analytical workflow, whether it's going to be through the function that's going to be released in a future update, or whether you just do it, perform the stain index through a regular mathematical calculation. We do have a web page available on our website now for stain index, as you can see here. And what we'll be doing is we'll be adding a lot of the layouts that you've seen today as sample layouts, so you can take the data and play with it as you need to. You can open up in our FCS Express reader, or you could just download the PDF and just view an example of what you've seen today. I also want to give a special thanks to Kelly Lunston at BioLegend and also Ellen Meinelt at BD Life Sciences for providing me the data files. They were a big help, and I'm completely grateful for them to helping us out for this particular webinar. Okay, so at this time, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the questions webinar, the questions section of your webinar control panel, and we'll be happy to answer them for you. We'll stay on the line for a couple more minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at support@denovosoftware.com, or you can go directly to our website at fcsexpress.com or denovosoftware.com. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the questions section of your webinar control panel. Okay, so it doesn't seem like we have any questions. So again, if you have any questions, please email us at support@denovosoftware.com. If something comes up regarding stain index or any other type of analysis that you're doing in FCS Express, we'd be happy to help you. You can always visit us at our website at fcsexpress.com. We have many resources that are available to you, many recorded webinars, tutorials, video clips to show different functionality within FCS Express. You can also find our manual online, our comprehensive manual. There are many questions that you may have that you can find within that manual. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us on today's webinar. As I mentioned, this will be available on our website fairly shortly and also available on our YouTube channel. So please, when you get a chance, if there were things that you missed, please feel free to watch them at your leisure. Or you can just email us at support@denovosoftware.com. Thank you and have a great day.